This video is to be used as a review and not to replace the in-person respiratory training. This is the Puritan Bennet 980 ventilator. Avera Marshall does have 4 of these. We keep one down in the emergency room. We keep one in room 212 storage, and there's also 2 as backup up in the respiratory care department. When you put one in use, always make sure you have a backup. Go up and get another one to replace it. You do not want to be caught without a vent in an emergency situation. So when you get this into the patient's room, you plug in your oxygen and your O2 and air if there is some. What's nice about this ventilator, there is an air compressor, so if you are by chance in a room that does not have wall air, you can use it. Just keep in mind it will be louder because of the air compressor. Okay, now there is a cheat sheet on the side of the vent, and it kind of walks you right through. Also, there is a picture of setup if you ever question anything, and on the back of that, what equipment, what the pieces each one are, and what is optional. So, first thing, like the cheat sheet says, is when you turn on this machine, you always have to have the Y open. So this is the Y. I take it right there and open it up. If you do not open that, it's a closed circuit, and as a safety, it locks you out and you will not be able to push any keys. Everyone does it one time, they never forget it again. This is your on switch. The first screen you will see is in this section here. It'll tell when it passed its last test, and that should have been done when somebody had cleaned it and reset it up. And it also tell you when the biomed passed their last test. So we're looking for SST being passed. Right now it's running through a post. It's called a post. It's an automatic test. So everything is passed. It's all green. It also tells us that we have an adult circuit and that we're using the HME. This is our only humidifier on this machine. There is no way to put in another type of humidifier. So this is the screen you get. So if somebody has already cleaned it and run it through the check, which is supposed to be done, the first thing you do when you get in the room then is you do new patient. Another thing you might want to do is this alarm is super loud and piercing. It's a safety thing. If you push this button here and you dial it down, it turns that alarm right down for you. So, okay, this is your screen. You want to decide, okay, do we have a male or female patient? Today we're going to go with a male patient. I always, no matter if I set this up for BiPAP or a ventilator, I always choose to put in their height and their gender. So this gentleman, we're going to make him, I don't know, let's go with about 5'10", okay? That will put settings in here if you need to start it right away and adjust later. You know, when there's an emergency, sometimes you don't have time to play with the settings. Now, the other thing you got to know, though, before you put it on the patient is this going to be invasive or non-invasive? Are they intubated or not intubated? That is the question. So right now, we're going to say this patient is intubated, and I'm in a hurry to get this patient on this machine, and I will adjust later. Hit quick start. That's all there is to it. And then you put this patient on the vent. Okay? Obviously, this would be still in line. You would take the blue cap off, and this would be what would hook to the patient. Okay? This is your CO2 line, your HME, and then your flex tube, so on. So every time you put this on a patient or you make a vent setting, it's going to alarm and tell you that you have to adjust your alarms. Remember, alarms are your friend. It's what watches your patient and tells you if there's a change or something needs to be done. People hate alarms. They try to bypass them all the time, hitting silence, 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 silence. On this machine, if you continue to hit silence, and don't address the problem, there's a shutoff valve that actually will shut and the machine will stop running. This takes quite a few times though, so don't panic about that. It's a safety feature, so use alarms as your friend. There's your alarm button. So it's going to tell you to adjust. But we really want to make adjustments on what the patient's on first. So we go here. So tap this button, it brings this screen up. If you want the screen to stay up, you hit this button right here. It's a push pin and it'll keep the screen up. So on your cheat sheet on the side of your of the vent here, there is actually it breaks, I'll show you on yours. It breaks it down, your settings. Okay, so it'll say basic setting for a ventilator. You want invasive. You're going to want assist control. We almost always use assist control at this facility. It gives us better control of the patient. You may use SMV or spontaneous, but very rarely. Bi-level is not BiPAP. Do not let that confuse you. It tells you on your cheat sheet the same thing. That is not BiPAP. It's more like an AVAP type situation. The other thing is mandatory type. You want to always, if the patient is intubated, use VC+. If you do not use VC+, the patient feels like they're breathing through a straw and they're not going to be as compliant with the machine. So always put it in VC+. Plus it opens up different settings for you down here where it makes it easier to control your patient and so on. And you want V-trigger. So then you get down here. Now every vent calls something different. On this vent, F is frequency, which means rate. There's your tidal volume, your inspiratory time. I always leave this at 3. There's your oxygen. I always leave this alone because the vent sets all this up for you. And PEEP and your inspiratory tidal volume. So what you need to set up is rate. I never ventilate a patient at a rate of 10. That is way too slow. I would probably up that to 16, 18 on a regular patient. So you're going tidal volume. Am I giving the patient enough tidal volume? You always ask yourself that. Well, because you put your height and your gender in, it calculates it for you. Down here, it's a little cheat area. You always want to give your patient between 6 and 8 milliliters per kilogram. Well, right there, it says it's 6.3. I think I could do a hair better, so I'm going to adjust. But it was fine to start, right? So I'm going to go up to, let's go 480 just for right now. Then you got your eye time. Okay, that's how fast they're getting their inspiratory breath. Okay, 90% of the time, if you put that at 1, it'll be perfect because what that does is drives your IE ratio. So right here, now my IE ratio is 1 to 2.33. Not bad. This would be a great IE ratio for a patient. Then, like I said, I leave my V-sense alone. Now this is your oxygen. You're hoping you don't have to have 100%, but you watch their sats and you put it to your lowest desired FiO2 to reach your goal. Then PEEP. I never ventilate at 3. I don't know why this machine comes up at 3, but the lowest I ever go is 5. Okay? So my settings, I feel pretty good about it. I accept them all, and there it drove it up to 6.58 milliliters per kilogram. If we don't feel that's quite enough for the patient, we can always adjust it another time. So now it alarmed. You can tap that, and it's just saying, I didn't adjust it. So this is your minute volume, and 9 out of 10 times that's the alarm that's going to alarm first. So this is what the patient's giving us, and this is what the alarms are set at. So obviously I need to up this a little bit. If he's giving us 8.5, high 8s, we're going to probably want to go up to maybe like about 11, and then you could accept it. But since we're in there, let's also adjust the other things. Your tidal volume, you want about 200 above, where we had them set at 480. Let's go up to about 7. Remember, it's approximately. But that gives me a good idea. I know where my alarms are set, so I know if it alarms what's going on. Again, your peak pressure, you always leave at about 40, because I want to know, does the patient need suctioning? Is there a kink in the tube, or is he starting to develop ARDS? Now, your rate, you can leave off, or if you're watching the patient closely, you could put his rate at whatever level you wanted to keep an eye on him at. You know, it just depends on what your patient's doing, but you're going to want to set a little bit above, but then you can keep an eye on it. So now I accept that all, and that alarm should go away. Now, another place you could have done the alarms, other than where it was alarming up there, I'm going to close this. I could have brought it up right here There's another spot. And there's also on the side, which I'll go through all the buttons. So now that's what we gave the patient. That's this right here. Now, what is the patient giving us? That's always the good thing to look at. If you tap this twice, this is what the patient is giving us. There's his peak pressure, his tidal volume, frequency, mean, and so on. Now, again, I was saying how every ventilator calls something different, and to keep track of that is almost impossible, right? So if you want to know what any of this means, you touch this question mark and you drag it up here to whatever you want to know. It'll actually tell you exactly what that means. So that's really, really a super nice feature. So another thing I want to mention is on your cheat sheet, it actually explains what all these things mean too. So like your ventilated type, obviously it's either invasive or non-invasive. And your modes, it explains what these modes all mean. Your mandatory type, again, it's what kind of control you are giving the patient. This isn't even lit up because we're not in the spontaneous mode. That explains all that. And then it also the trigger type. It explains it step by step. So just look at the cheat sheet. It explains what they mean and so on. So I'm going to go through what some of these other things are. So I had tapped this to get this up. That's what this means. So the next thing that's there is apnea. This vent is so smart, it sets up backup apnea settings. If your patient would stop breathing for whatever, it would kick in with these automatic settings. So you don't even have to adjust that. Then here was the other place where you can find alarms. There's always 3 places for everything on this machine, I swear. It was there, up there, and right there. More settings. What is that? Well, more settings tells us the leak sync. Okay, so when we look at that, that's like when we have a patient on BiPAP mask. Okay, so that leak, this is so sensitive, it's going to alarm a lot. But you want to chart what they are on, how much leak they have with their mask. At that time, hit enable, hit accept, and it'll pop up right here how much leak you have at that time. Remember, when you use a BiPAP mask, 25 is your goal for it. You don't want it lower than that because it means your mask is too tight, but you want to keep it as close to 25 as possible in dream world. Okay, so back to where we were. It's the setup button and more settings. So we usually disable that just because the alarm will go off a lot. Your O2 sensor, you always want that on because otherwise you won't know what kind of oxygen you're giving your patient. The humidification you pick always is HME because that's the little device we have on. It's the only humidity we have, accept all. Okay, back to menu over here. We're just going to go down the list. RM, what is RM? RM stands for, stands for respiratory mechanics. Now, I usually take care of most of that, but ERT might on occasion ask you what a number is. That's where you go for respiratory mechanics. It'll tell you in the inspiratory phase what your plateau pressures are, your static compliance, and your static resistance. So you're saying, how do I do it? Well, you just push start, count to 3, 1, 2, 3, let go, and it'll pop up a number for you. Wait a second, do it again. You'll get 3 of them. And always accept each one and get your 3 so you got an average. And then they'll be able to see the screen. This thing moves so nice you can usually shine it right on where they're looking on the camera. Another way to get into inspiratory phase is right here where you're breathing in the lungs. If I would have pushed that button, I would have got this same picture on. Okay? Expiratory pause. Okay, what does that give us? That gives you your total PEEP and eccentric PEEP. These are all respiratory mechanic numbers that overall you probably won't pay much attention to. It's just going to be when Sioux Falls asks the question. Another way to get into expiratory pause is right here. You would push that button, it would bring this screen up. You do it the same way. Count to 3. 1, 2, 3, and it'll pop right on. Accept it, get your average, and so on. Okay? Now, I have never had to do the vital capacity, and I've never had to do this one here. So don't ever worry about it. The one you may want to know for your own sake is your NIF. negative inspiratory force. This is a number that you want to know before you extubate a patient. You want the patient to have at least a negative 25 inspiratory force. It's how much pull they have when they inhale before you extubate. Because if they don't have a 25, they're probably not going to do well without that ET tube. So with this one, you have them, they have to be awake, and you have them take a big breath in. You say, take a big breath in, and you start. And obviously that was only a negative 6. An artificial lung doesn't work so great for this, but you would accept it. You'd wait a little bit, and like 30 seconds, and do it again, and you'd try to get to a negative 25 or greater, and then you would know your patient probably will be successful being intubated. Okay, we're going to close that. I'm going to bring this back up. The next thing on the side is standby. Well, that one we always want to know. You push standby. Take the patient off, hold it away from you, obviously, and confirm it. And it'll sit on standby for days if you leave it, okay? So it's good if you're weaning or if you're trying to do whatever. It's most of the time we use this more like on BiPAP. If you take a patient down to CT or something, you would put it in standby. This ventilator does have backup battery, but it does not have oxygen tanks attached to it, so there's no way to bleed oxygen in. So you would have to, if the patient is intubated, you would have to bag them. If they're not intubated, you would have to put them on probably like a non-rebreather. If you're worried because they are on like a lot of pressures and a lot of PEEP, then you would maybe put a nasal cannula underneath a non-rebreather and put it on anywhere from 5 to 10 liters of on the cannula, and then you would max out at 15 liters on your non-rebreather, because that would give it a type of PEEP and pressures to get you down there. So that was standby. Now, screen capture, we don't use this because we don't download this into our mainstream computer. So that's all that was. The next one is trending. You may want to look at that, but highly unlikely, so don't worry too much about that. Okay? So now down here, remember this is how we got into this screen. But there's also, if you want the abbreviated version of that, if you tap here, it just brings the abbreviated without all those top numbers to confuse you, which is sometimes kind of nice. It also, reminds you where you're at, using your height and gender to get to your good tidal volume range. Then down here, keep going across screen. This is home. That's what's going to bring this up. This was your alarms. This is a wrench. This is something you will never use, but it's there. Chart. Now that's one you might use, because sometimes you get busy and don't chart what you need to chart. It's just like when you're charting in your computer. So you want to remember when was that alarm going off and he was having a little issue or a coughing streak. You can go hit alarms here. It'll tell you what the event was and how long it went on and so on. The next one is settings. Okay, I made a vent setting change, but I don't remember what time it was or what was it I changed. You can go back into here. It'll tell you what you changed, what the previous value was, and what the current value is. So it's really nice. The other one you might like is a patient data. So what changed? What did the patient get? What was he giving me? What did it change to? Or what was he happening at a such and such a time? What was his peak flow? I noticed that his peak inspiratory pressure is gradually going up. You could look back and say, hey, this kind of started about such and such a time and it kept going for how long, and it went from this range. So it's all kinds of different. You can go down, it'll tell you all that information. Now, diagnostics is something you will never use. That's something that I use and Biomed does, and the rest of these also that type of thing. But these top three you will find very, very handy for yourself. Now, manual event down here, we don't use that because, again, this isn't hooked to our computer system. It would be nice because if you did and you suction a patient, you would just hit that button and it would chart that it charts it for you. We don't have that luxury on this. Now, this one is 100% oxygen. It goes for 2 minutes and turns itself off. What's nice about this machine is you can extend it if you choose to, or you can stop it. Or if you got a patient, let's say, is a really fragile CO2 patient, and you don't want to go from, let's say he's on 30% oxygen, and you don't want to go all the way up to 100, but you want to pre-oxygenate him before you suction or whatever the situation is. You can hit this button, and you can set it at 20% above, 30% above, whatever he was set at. It'll set it for you. It's great. So I'm going to close that now. Now it's still blinking. If it drives you crazy and you don't want that on anymore, you can actually stop it. Then the next thing is a camera. Okay, that would be if there was something going on and you wanted a picture of that. And our computer, we'd have to download it. And then on this machine, we'd have to download it. And then you'd have to send it. If you want a picture of something to send to me or ERT or anybody else, we have our Volt phones. Just take a picture of it, send it that way. Don't use this. Then the other thing is, remember that that question mark is your friend. Anything up here, you can drag it and it'll tell you what it is. Now you're like, well, why doesn't it do it for this down here? Well, remember, you tap that and that's up there. Now it does. Now you can drag it and it'll tell you what it is. Okay, so now some of the other settings. So now we had done invasive patient, an intubated patient. So then we're going to now do a BiPAP patient. Remember, you got to grab your mask. They're located in ER in the trauma room drawer and up on CCU, top shelf of their CCU supply room respiratory cart, or there's always extra if they run out up in respiratory supply room. We have to use a non-ventilated mask. This is the only kind of mask we use at our facility. To measure how to use it, you look at the cheat sheet right here. This line here should go right here, and whatever color sits in the cleft of the chin, that's what size you use. If you're not sure if you should go to the next size, yes, then do. Go up one if you're contemplating, because you don't want it riding on their lip. So that's that. So to set for BiPAP, like it says on the cheat sheet, you can do it with a BiPAP with a rate or without a rate. I always use with a rate because I have more control. But I will first show you how to do it without a rate. You would pick NIV, non-invasive. You would pick spontaneous. You leave that empty, obviously. And it already tells you pressure control and V trigger. Now, the thing at this is, with this machine, is you have to add your I and your E together to get your I. And you have your PEEP. So always set your PEEP first. So my PEEP is at 5. And if I wanted 10 over 5, I would go to pressure support here. And I would turn that to 5. Right now, that would be a 10 over 5. Okay? So then you would hit accept, and then you would be on a BiPAP of 10 over 5. Now, if I wanted to do one with a rate, like I said, I always do that because I got more control. You push this button again, you do NIV. This time you do assist control, like you're doing a vent, okay? Then you do pressure controlled ventilation, and then of course V trigger, because it's the only choice you got. Now this time you add this one and this one together. So right now this is at 20 over 5. Make sure you turn that down. So if you wanted a 10 over 5, you'd put this a 5 and that a 10. Now you got control over your rate, and you got an I time, so you can give your IE ratio, and you just have much more control of your patient. And it also will be telling you down this corner, what kind of tidal volume are you getting with using this pressure? So it's a win-win. And again, because I changed something, your alarms are going to probably go off, and you might have to look at what you changed. Okay, and it's saying apnea just because of the fact I had it without a rate first, and now we're with a rate. Okay, and this should go away in a minute here. So let's get back to this again. It actually, we didn't push accept. So there, whoops, there we go, there we go, there we go. There. Now it won't alarm. So always make sure you hit accept, and always make sure you know what your I and your E is. See, it resorted back because I didn't accept it. So remember now, if you have somebody with just CHF, a normal type thing, you would do a 10 over 5 and a rate probably 16 to 18. I time always 1. If you have somebody with a high CO2, you're going to up this. You'd maybe go 10 here. So then it would be like a 15/5 to blow that CO2 off. And you would also at that time up your rate to blow that CO2 off. There you go. So now you also, okay, I made a change. It's going to alarm. You're going to have to check your alarms to make sure that you're still within range. See, this one will drop every time as a safety so that you have to go back and take a look at it. Now, if you have a patient who they want just on straight CPAP, okay, you can do that. You take that, it's NIV, it's spontaneous. Those already are set for you. The only number you have then is your PEEP. If it's straight CPAP, I will probably go with about a 6 to start, and you leave your pressure support at 0. So that'll give you a CPAP of 6, and make sure you accept it. And of course, the vent's probably going to alarm because now there's no backup rate to drive it. If it's on a patient, it will not alarm because the patient is actually breathing. So that's how you work that. Now let's put this back to an invasive patient. And again, now we're going to have to go back to our settings. If you did try to put an intubated patient on BiPAP for a while, you can do that. Just make sure you keep it invasive versus non-invasive. Also, if you tried a setting and it didn't work and you want to go back to it right away, you could have hit, it would have had a symbol right here. It says previous settings or something to that effect. And then you could have went back to that. So I'm just going back to where we were how many times ago. And I'll just leave that PEEP on there. That's fine. Okay, so we can do inline vent nebs on here. Again, see, I made a change. It's going to want me to change that. You can do your inline nebs. When you do an inline neb on a ventilator, make sure you put your T-piece between here and your flex tube, like this. You do not want this, because this is hooked on right here. You do not want to do this before your humidifier, otherwise you're going to put all the neb medicine right into that sponge and the patient's really not going to get any. Remember, when you do an inline neb, you open that, you push this on, it's run off the wall, and this helps give that angle so that your neb isn't tipping and it nebs better. Always make sure you watch your tidal volumes and your pressure on your vent when you're adding more flow to your system. Okay, just keep an eye on it. You might have to run the neb a little bit lower if it starts to creep up on your vent. When you're done, make sure you take it out, leave that plugged, and so on. We also have, if you needed to, we could do inline MDIs. Now, when you do that, again, you would have put it right here, between the patient and your HME. You take it out of the canister. This faces up this time, not a neb like this, but up. You do this. And you have, this is your psi button. This is time and a half your tidal volume. So you go squirt and you push that at the same time. It'll give the patient a big breath so the medicine gets in there. You wait a minute and you do it again. And then afterwards you can leave it inline in your circuit again, or you can take this piece out. It's up to you. A few other buttons that I can mention is, this is bright and dark in your screen. Sometimes it's too bright for a patient or whatever situation. This locks your screen. I just locked it. And I can unlock it by holding it. There. And this, remember, is that alarm. It's going to be loud if you don't adjust it. This is your psi button, inspiratory, big breath, time and a half your tidal volume. Remember, these two are respiratory mechanics, inspiratory and expiratory phase. This is your reset alarm, and this is your alarm. There you go. And a couple other things is, up in the corner, you will see, if you see an A, that means that it's assisted breath. If it's a C, it is a controlled breath, and S is spontaneous breath. Let's see. When you chart, make sure you chart mechanical ventilation first day when you set it up on a patient, and each day after that is subsequent. I do believe they do that on night shift early in the morning, but double check. Other thing you have to do daily is change your HME, or if it seems like there's a lot of moisture in there, some of your COPD patients will seem to have a lot more moisture in there. Another thing is, if you have an intubated patient, tape the syringe for the cuff right here. Then you always have it. If you have a leaky cuff, you don't want to have to go run and try to find the right syringe. When they intubate the patient, take that syringe from anesthesia and tape it right here. The other thing is, if you have inline suctioning, this is our inline suctioning. You take this piece out. This I also tape here, and you're like, what is that for? This works really good if you need to take your pieces apart. It pops it off really nice. It saves a lot of headaches. So I tape that right there. Also, this goes in line, and you want this goes right to your ET tube, and this goes to your vent circuit. Okay, and you always want to remember that when in doubt, if you go like this, you know that has to go straight into the patient. When you do use that on a patient, this comes off and this hooks to your suction canister tubing. When you suction a patient, hold on to your ET tube in this, and you push, slide, push, slide, push, slide, push, slide, push, slide, till you reach a resistance. Then you push this button and suck it back. Suck it right all the way out. Make sure you always see this line afterwards, because otherwise you're leaving that tube in their airway, and they're not going to get enough volume and pressures. If they have thick secretions and you need to thin them out, this is where you use one of those pink bullets of saline. You hook it on there, squirt it, then go down and suction. The pink bullets you have to get from pharmacy. Make sure you always close that. The other thing is, this has got a lock on it, because you leave this in line. It's a closed circuit. It's meant to stay in the circuit line. Now, it's got a lock because patients can be rolled over on it, and you don't want that constant suction. So always lock it when you're not done. When you're ready to use it, you just turn it, and then there you go. It's unlocked. So lock and unlock. It's a safety feature that works terrific. When a patient is started on a ventilator, I put it on my schedule upstairs, so I watch to make sure that the circuits are changed when they're supposed to. As to your cheat sheet, it tells you that the expiratory filter, which is this behind this door right here, is changed every 15 days. I will change that. The circuit itself is changed once a week. Again, I will take care of that. If you have a pediatric patient, we can use this vent, but only down to 57 pounds, and it is on your cheat sheet. We can only go as low as 57 pounds and a tidal volume of 31 milliliters. The reason is, we only in this facility have adult circuits. It's not the vent that won't go any lower. It's our circuits will only support those levels. So if you would have a pediatric patient, also remember you're going to probably do pressure ventilation versus volume ventilation. You will want ERT or me to be driving those numbers for you. And inspiratory time, you're going to want to keep it about 0.6, but you got to watch their peak flow to keep that around 15. Again, that's on your cheat sheet. I already talked about on the cheat sheet, there's miscellaneous here about the non-vented mask. That's the mask you use, and so on and so on. If you have any questions at any time, please reach out to me. So now when you're done with this ventilator, you turn the switch off here and hit power, and it'll turn off. Okay, so now everything is disposable. So take this off, this off. Remember, it's your responsibility to clean this machine, reset it up, and have it tested out and plugged into 212. Do not push it into 212 until this has been done. This door opens carefully so you don't break the latch. You need to remove the expiratory filter and throw it. You take a gray top wipe everything down. Then you there's a grab bag that it's labeled as the ventilator setup and so on. There's 2 of these in ER in their cupboard, 2 in the CCU storeroom And also, if they run out of them there, RT has got several up in their supply room. When you open this up, everything you need, other than inline nebs or vents, inline suction or nebs, is in here. When I set this up, the first thing I do is I open this. That's your expiratory filter. I push this here to make sure that's shut tight. You don't want to leak. You slide it in here, shut it, and shut that down. You know it's in there properly when this shuts smooth. Then the next thing I do is I grab the bacteria filter. Okay? Put that on right there. And everything is on the picture on the side of the vent, so don't forget, look at the picture if you're in doubt. The next thing I do is I open up the circuit. Now, in the circuit there's this little baggie, and it's got the little hanger that you're going to put on here. And there's one extra blue tube right here. You see this one? You throw that away. Everything else you'll need. So it'll look like this. So I took that little hanger out. You put that right on here. Now, blue is always inspiratory. Goes on the inspiratory line. White is exhalation. Goes here. Again, the picture will show you. When you open this up, there is a blue cap as such. At this point is where you check it out. You do your checkout on the vent. The other pieces are laying here, and I'll show you those in a second. So remember, when you turn this machine on, the Y has to be open, meaning uncap it. Now, when I do my checkout, I need to be plugged into the wall, and I need to have oxygen. If I don't have air in the room, I can do this checkout just fine. It's just going to be louder. Since I do have those luxuries, I'm going to leave it on. So you turn it on. And remember, I've already gray top wiped everything off. I've also updated this little cheat sheet, and it's on the side here, knowing that it's clean. Do not throw the lung away. It is attached for a reason. It is a very expensive item. Just wipe it down real good. It's going to run through that post test just like it did when we used it the first time. This checkout literally only takes 4 minutes, so it's worth the headache to have it done. So when you put it on a patient, that's already been taken care of for you. That's the nice thing. And that checkout is good for a long time. So this is that same screen we had before, but this time you're going to go SST. So you just literally follow the directions. To run SST, touch run all SST. Remember, I had my Y open. Okay, run. Okay, to accept, press accept to confirm, okay? And always pick adult circuit, even if you're going to use it on a kid, because remember, we only have adult circuits, and we only have HMEs as our humidification. Okay. Connect circuit with inspiratory filter and without humidifier. So we have inspiratory circuit, we have the filter, and we do not have the humidifier on at this time. So we are good to go. What's nice about this, okay, it also says block Y, okay, accept. What's nice is it tells me how much time is left of this whole checkout, plus it tells me where I'm at with each section and the countdown. So I know I'm making progress. If one section does not check out, you can actually stop and it'll give you the cue that you can rerun, and you just have to start from that point again. You don't have to go all the way back to the beginning. It's kind of nice. And I know when you're standing looking at it, 4 minutes seems like eternity, but you can run to the computer, look at something, come back, push the next button if you have to, or stand next to it and do your charting. Remember, at this point, that air compressor would be going, that's all normal. And you do not use the artificial lung for test out. People sometimes make that mistake. You do not. This is literally testing everything about the machine, and it's making sure your circuit has no leaks. Okay, disconnect circuit at expiratory filter. All you do is take the white tube off like this, hold it in your hand, hit accept. This is really a quick one. Okay, reconnect, put it back on, and hit accept. Unblock the Y. That's just that blue cap. Take it off. It says to block the Y. Put the cap back on. Almost there. Unblock the Y one more time. Okay, now it says it passed. It's all done. Look at that. Passed everything. Great. So at this time, let's say you just finished testing this out, and all of a sudden your coworker says, we need that vent down the hall. You could literally, at that time, unplug it and leave it on, because it does have that backup battery, and run it to whatever room you need, and you could hit patient setup, and you could start from here. Or if it's just a normal cleanup and setup, at this point you would reach down here and you would turn it off, and it powers off. So now the other pieces that you had to put together that were in your grab bag is your end title. You put that on next, and I don't like it flopping around, so I usually just kind of tuck it in here just to keep it from hitting the floor and so on. Then you got your HME, and then you got your flex tube. Then put that blue cap on there to keep everything nice and clean. You unplug everything, and you push it down to 212, or an ER, you push it back to their room where they plug it in. If it's an extra vent and you don't need it on whatever floor you have for whatever reason, it can be pushed up to 4th floor in RT department too. But always make sure you have a backup vent available.